Today I am going to be doing a short little video on how I try to smooth out the airflow in a flute that might have some, maybe a little bit of a not quite an airy type noise, but just some noise in the airflow. It's kind of a you can just hear a little turbulence. And so what I'm going to be doing is trying to show what I do on how to try to fix that in a very gentle way. Remember that the first step that you should take is to contact the maker of the flute. If you have any questions or concerns about the flute, always use that as the first step. The only reason that I do this is because I do make flutes and I know some of the things that I can do that are not going to harm the flute. Bear that in mind as you watch. Thanks for tuning in. So the flute that I had worked on is this one, the Enchanter from Spirit Dancer Flutes. And I just have the fetish on there with a rubber band right now. I'm going to remove that. The fetish block, the underside of the fetish block, this area is called the flue. On this particular flute, the flue is made on the fetish block, not in the flute body, in between the two holes. The two holes here, your breath goes into the mouthpiece end. It hits a wall right about here. As your breath goes in, the chamber usually on most flutes opens up a little bit, and that's called the slow air chamber up in this area inside. This hole right here is called the slow air chamber exit hole. Some flutes will have a groove, very, very shallow groove like this in the flute body. Some will have it in the fetish block. Either design is perfectly all right. In this case, it's in the fetish block. And so what I had to do was to very gently smooth this out because it was a little bit rough. So what I do, I have just a little, this is a plastic vise that I got at a yard sale with one of this type of a workmate, Black & Decker workmate portable workbench. And I have these little very, very fine files, needle files. I got this at a hobby shop. You can get them at some woodworking places also. And some very, very fine sandpaper. This is 220 grit. And what I did was I just wrapped this on the flat blade about 3 turns. And keeping it very, very flat on the same surface as that, I just very carefully brought that back and forth across the width of that flue area and made sure that this stayed flat. That way I'm not changing the angle at all. The sandpaper, or you could use the file itself if it is very, very fine, and this is. So you could just, I put my finger or a thumb there just to make sure that it's staying flat, and I just use another hand to guide it back and forth. What I've also done on this particular one was I used a needle or a leveling rasp, and this has much more aggressive teeth on it, and I actually lowered this just a little bit at the same spacing that is between the edges of the true sound hole. On this one you can see the true sound hole isn't quite rectangular, it's canted a little bit. Ideally, this edge and this edge should be parallel, and they should be square, like at a 90-degree angle to the rest of the flute for best results. This one seems to be fine. I didn't want to, if you start changing this, you can change the pitch of the flute. You can change how things react a lot, how the air goes in and sets up the sound, because the flue connecting these two areas together, the flue ends right at the edge of the true sound hole, releasing that ribbon of air to go across this, and the vacuum makes the air pressure go in and out, and that's what sets up the actual sound. So I didn't want to mess with this area. I did open up this quite a bit because this was a hole that was about that size. That was about the size of the hole. And I opened it up slightly and I created a longer ramp area right here with my leveling rasp. So I leveled that, made sure I was in a direct line with the true sound hole, and then I smoothed it back out with this one, with this file, and I smoothed the edges also, making sure that that lines up. And I didn't go any further this way because I didn't want to go beyond the flue area that was cut into the fetish block. I used some Formby's tongue oil finish to refinish this area and the area that I cut out here. This area is the most critical along with the flue because that's where the moisture from your breath can collect. You smooth this out as much as possible to help prevent beads of moisture from collecting in between the flue and the area in between the exit hole from the slow air chamber and the true sound hole. If any moisture collects there, that's what they call wet out. If there's any turbulence here, that's what can cause some of those sound artifacts, that kind of a noise instead of an airy noise. So that's how I went about modifying not just this flute, but any flute that I might have that type of a difficulty with. Remember, you should always contact the flute maker, especially if you've never done any of this type of work before, because that way they can let you know if that's something that they would recommend or if they would like you to send that back. Most flute makers should be willing to make the flute respond better to your expectations. And here is how the flute sounded when I was done. So I hope this helped. Thanks for watching.